Starry River, Chapter 19. Preferring to continue their conversation out of the heat of the sun, Master Chow and Widow Yan walked together into the inn. Their shadows trailed behind them, and when the back door was closed, Pei and Mei Lan began to jump up and down. Even Rindy grinned. "Now Jiming can come home," Pei squealed. She grabbed Mei Lan's waist and danced around her. "You can get married!" "And I can leave," Rindy thought. He looked up at the sun, gleaming in the sky like a burning piece of coal. It's hot to travel by walking, though. Maybe I'll wait a few more days. It might get cooler." "I can't believe it," Mei Lan said in dazed delight. "How did this happen?" "It's because Mr. Shan knew the answer," Pei said. "Rindy told the story, and Madam Chan asked Mr. Shan, and now everything's good." Rindy could see that Mei Lan had no idea what Pei was talking about, but was too full of happiness to ask for further explanations. "We have to tell Jiming," Mei Lan said. Suddenly her smile waned, and the brightness in her eyes dimmed. "But how?" "He'll come back," Pei said. "He has to come back, right?" "I don't know," Mei Lan said, as she untangled herself from Pei's arms. "We don't even know where he is." "But," Pei said, as she stopped dancing. Mei Lan had already turned and started back to her house. "Well, maybe we can find him somehow," Mei Lan said, her back toward them. They saw her shoulders sink, and she sounded far from hopeful as she opened the door. "I'll think about it and talk to you later." "But," Pei said again as Mei Lan closed the door behind her. And with a plaintive, soft cry, "But Mr. Shan answered the question." Pei's head drooped, and all signs of her previous joy faded away. Downcast, she began to stack the used dishes on the table. Rindy felt a pang of sadness for her, but her words sparked a sudden curiosity in him. "Pei," Rindy said, emptying the teapot onto the ground, "has Mr. Shan always been this way?" "What way?" she asked. "Oh, I don't know," he said, struggling to explain. "Kinda crazy. Sometimes he seems half asleep, but other times he laughs and answers questions." "He's more cheerful now," Pei said, stopping to consider it. "I've never heard him laugh before. He used to always just read a big book and be annoyed at everyone. Jiming used to say he wished Mr. Shan would read a book on manners." "But he doesn't read anymore," Rindy said. "What happened?" "I don't know," Pei said. "Mr. Shan used to travel, too. Sometimes he'd disappear for months, and then one day he'd show up, reading and not noticing anyone around him again, like he never left. But this last time, Mr. Shan came back without the book." Rindy frowned. The tea he had poured had already dried up. Only a thin line of dampness remained, like a dark thread on the stone ground. What was it that Mr. Shan had said to Madam Chang that first evening? Something about a book. "And I think that's about when he started getting so slow and mixed up," Pei said slowly. "It's almost like he's lost sometimes." "He's like that a lot of time," Rindy said. Pei squinted at Rindy as if the sun was reflecting off of him. "This is the first time you've ever asked me about anybody," she said. "You never seemed to care about anyone else before." Rindy shrugged, and then for no reason he grinned at her. Pei's eyes widened, and a small, crooked smile grew on her face in response. Suddenly they both laughed, and Rindy realized that it was not just Master Chow and Widow Yan who had become friends. Chapter 20. The night continued its moaning, and the day returned to its usual blistering heat. Yes, Rindy thought as he helped Pei wash the floors, both of them splashing as much water at each other as they did the ground. It was too hot to leave the village now. If he had to travel by foot, it would be better to wait a week or so. But right before dinner the next day, Rindy returned from the Half Moon Well. A group of fine horses and carriages stood in front of the inn. New guests. Master Chow, almost twitching with eagerness, met Rindy at the door. "Take care of the horses," Master Chow said, almost pushing him, "and hurry back. There'll be a lot of new guests. We'll need your help serving." Rindy led the horses to the stable, filling all the stalls. He was forced to leave the carriages outside, as there was no room in the small stable, but he was able to inspect them. One carriage, its insides covered with plush cushions and shaded by silk curtains, was obviously to carry the honored guest. The guest must be very wealthy, perhaps even royalty, for the other carriages seemed to be solely for his luggage. There should be plenty of places for Rindy to hide, to leave the village of Clear Sky. He would not have to walk after all. He would crawl into one of these carriages and ride away, just like he'd originally planned. Somehow, the thought did not fill Rindy with the happiness he expected. He brushed the horses, frowning. Well, he could help Master Chow and Pei Yi with the guests before he left. They needed his help to serve dinner, at the very least. And maybe he could find a way to say goodbye to them, and to Madame Chang, and Mr. Shan, and even Mei Lan, and Willow Yan too. A strange, hard lump seemed to form in Rindy's throat, and he had a hard time swallowing. "Rindy!" a loud whisper called from the back door of the inn. It was Pei Yi. "What are you doing? We need your help." Rindy put down the horse breasts and left the stable. Pei stood at the inn's doorway and dragged him inside. "Hurry," she urged. "Some important government official is here." Rindy glanced toward the new guests. The government official clearly was very important. Champions, who could only be his servants and guards, flanked him on all sides. The only things Rindy could see of the important government official were his silk robes and his pale, thin hands, which looked as if they had never held anything heavier than a lute. Impressed by the guest's obvious high stature, Master Chow was filled with nervousness. He had filled a jug with wine, and the liquid wine made tiny waves in his hand as his hands trembled. It was sun wine, the wine Master Chow had brought from the merchant not so long ago. Rindy thought with a pang, but he said nothing. Master Chow jumped and almost spilt the wine when the two new guests, dusty-looking traders, entered. "More guests," Pei said to Rindy. She sighed as the travelers insisted on a first-floor room in the center of the inn. "And superstitious ones, too?" "What do you mean?" Rindy asked. "Ghosts are supposed to gather in the rooms at the end of the inn," Pei snorted. "Superstitious guests always want rooms in the middle." Rindy grinned, but their conversation was cut short as Master Chow rushed toward them. "Rindy," Master Chow said, pushing the jug of wine toward him, "serve this." "Shouldn't I look after the animals?" Rindy asked, motioning at the traders. Master Chow looked around at the busy dining room. Madame Chang and Mr. Shan had also seated themselves at a table. He grimaced. "Serve the wine," he said, "then take care of the animals, and hurry." Rindy spun around quickly, running into one of the superstitious traders walking to another table. The trader's belt had a tiger's paw hanging from it, and it swung toward Rindy as if trying to claw him. He stumbled to the official's table, barely keeping the wine from tipping. "Careful, boy," one of the men said with a grin. "We'll have to behead you if you spill it on us." "Beheading?" another man bantered. "I think drawing and quartering would be more appropriate." "It's true," the man agreed with a mocking thoughtfulness. "There should be torture and death for insulting the men of Duke Che." Rindy's head jerked up, and with horror he stared at the government official, Magistrate Tiger's friend, Duke Che. Chapter 21. Rindy quickly glanced around him. Pei and Master Chow were busy working in the kitchen, and Madame Chang and Mr. Shan seemed to be in their own conversation. Rindy took a deep breath and turned back to the table, where Duke Che met his still panicked eyes with a benevolent smile. "Come now. Look, you've scared the poor boy," Duke Che said to his companions. "You know these peasant folk will believe anything. Look at that village we passed yesterday, with the dog bride." The men laughed, and Rindy could do nothing except to continue to gape, confusion flickering over his face. "You've never heard of it," the Duke said, mistaking Rindy's expression. "Perhaps it's just a local custom. Villagers dress up a dog as a bride in a red gown and the finest jewelry that they can afford. Then stage a wedding. They even put the dog in the covered sedan chair," hooted one of the men. "Oh, and have a long procession. It was a big parade in the entire village, just like a real wedding." "It's all for those in the Starry River above," Duke Che said. "They hope that it makes them laugh so hard that they cry, and then rain will fall." "Peasants are trying all sorts of things to make it rain," another man said. "The whole way here I've been seeing all kinds of superstitious appeals. Putting stone carvings in the hot sun to make them suffer, burning smoke in front of the statues hoping their eyes will water, throwing dirt on dragon figures." "What's that one for?" Duke Che said with amusement that made one of the traders scowl. "To make the dragon bring rain so he can clean himself," the man hooted. "But there's a drought happening everywhere but here. This is the first clean cup I've seen in a while." "Oh, it's been very dry here," Master Chow said, who had by this time come out of the kitchen with Paillet. "But our village wells still have some water. Oh, there must be something unusual about this place." Then one of the traders said, with eyes that looked at them with something like suspicion. He fingered the talisman on his belt. Instead of a tiger's paw like his companions, his was a circle made from a coffin nail. "Everywhere else is running out of water and begging for rain." "Randy," Paillet whispered to him. She'd come over with chopsticks and plates to put on the Duke's table. "Do you remember when you filled in the well and my father said he thought everyone else's well would go dry soon? They didn't go dry. Why?" Rindy tried to shrug. "It stayed hot and it didn't rain. Do you think there's something here that keeps the water from disappearing?" Paillet said. "Nothing's changed, except Madame Chang coming. But that wouldn't do anything, would it?" Rindy could not even shake his head, and finally Paillet gave him a puzzled look, now more confused about his uninterest than her questions. But Rindy felt frozen, barely able to move, much less talk. All he could do was continue to pour the wine, his knuckles turning white around the jug. Stopping point. Be continued.